Asato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotir gamaya Mrityormam amritam gamaya avir ahavir maedhi rudra yate dakshinam mukha te namaham pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness onto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the 5 sheaths. And we're going to be talking about a subject that is of interest to all of you, and that is yourself. Vedanta teaches us that there is a real and an apparent man. The real man is just your realized self, your ideal enlightened self. The apparent man is just your ordinary self. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, the 2nd chapter, it describes the 5 phenomenological selves that constitute the apparent man. Each one of these is called a kosha, which means a sheath. A sheath is a leather covering, protects us from the sharp edge of a knife. What it means here is a layer. And the idea is that we have our self-concept is layered. And just as we can peel back the skins of an onion, layer after layer, one after the other, and just as they say that maybe some of you have seen those small Russian matryoshka dolls, that is, it's a doll within a doll within a doll, each one smaller than and interior to the larger one. Similarly, it is with ourselves. We are a self within a self within a self. And I like to use the analogy there of an old Victorian lamp. There's the lamp, there's the light source, and then there's a paper-made shade around it. But they wanted to be a little more elaborate. So over that shade, paper shade, they would put some expensive fine fabric. And then over that, they would embroider different designs. And then over that, they would put tassels and designs on top of that. And so that in order to actually reach the light, you would have to penetrate through all of those 5 layers, those 5 sheaths. This is the problem which is before us this morning as Vedanta philosophers. That is, we need to sort ourselves out. Everything is all mixed up. All of these different self-concepts, one layered on top of another, they're all confused in our mind and our understanding. And that's our problem. Our problem is one of confusion. And the method is going to be one of discrimination. That is, we're going to use our own God-given reason to try to analyze these levels of ourself so that we can identify with our true nature, that is the inner light. The goal and purpose here is to remove the illusory superimposition, to remove all of the false beliefs that we have about ourselves, and to arrive at an understanding of what is our true nature. Now, when we begin to analyze ourselves, the first and most obvious candidate is our own physical flesh and blood body. And in fact, if we read in the 8th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, the Lord of this universe, Prajapati, he appeared at one time and he made a great proclamation. That is the self, the Atman, is infinite, divine existence, consciousness, and bliss. And he who knows this true Atman self becomes the ruler of all the worlds. And of course, all of the kings of the world, hearing that proclamation, they were interested. Two in particular approached Prajapati and asked him to teach them about the self. And they were told, yes, will you live with me first for 32 years? That's your preparation. No problem. They expected that. After that time, they were given the instruction. You see that pond over there? There's a pond there, which is the water is calm. There's no wind is blowing, and it's kind of like a mirror. Go over to that pond, and just look at yourself. What you see in reflection, that is yourself. And so, two kings, Indra and Virochana, they went over there and they looked in the water. And Virochana, he looked down, and what did he see? Well, there he saw his face. And all of his beautiful clothes and his robes and his jewelry. And he smiled, and he recognized himself. He says, yes, oh, that's myself. Oh, I'm so happy to know that. And his question was answered. And so he returned to his people. And in fact, later he became famous as the king of the demons, because he taught that the self is the body. But Indra, the second person, he looked in there, he saw the same, and he thought, that's myself. And he turned, but on his way home, he began to think and to ponder that. He said, that can't be true. The self is born, grows old, and dies, and changes. That can't be the true self. And so he returned to Prajapati for more instructions. So that's the first level. Sometimes we ourselves. You look in the mirror, you stand there, and maybe you're a man or a woman, you're tall or you're short or fat or thin. Do you think, well, there I am. That's me. I'm standing there. I'm right here. We identify with that image in the mirror, and that we take to be who we really are. That's our physical body. Well, teaching of Vedanta is this is not our true self, but we can't dissociate ourselves from our own body. We can't just disregard our own body, because although you're not the body, but we are embodied souls. That is, we are jivatmas. We are in the body. And therefore we need to treat it accordingly. And spiritual traditions around the world teach us that we ought to regard the body more as a vehicle for crossing over the ocean of this world, or more like regard it as the temple of God and take care of it. Sri Ramakrishna says that the enlightened master, that is the jnani, the person who knows his true nature, lives in the world like a dried up coconut. Coconut falls from the tree and it lies there on the ground for a while. And if no one takes it and breaks it open to eat it. For a while, it will just lie there, and source of time, kind of the interior, that is the flesh, will separate from the shell. And if you pick it up and you shake it, you can hear that coconut rattling inside the shell. Similarly as with the knower of the true self. He knows that he's in the body, he's aware of the body, but he's not identified with it. And therefore, in Vedanta, we just use our own simple reasoning power to think, yeah, that's true. What is this body? After all, it's just made of the 5 elements. It is made of what in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2nd chapter it calls, makes it easy for us. It said, what is this body? It's just food. It's born out of food. It's sustained by food. And to food alone, it returns in the end when we're buried in the ground. And so it's inert. It is not our conscious self. It's always changing. It's born, grows old, disease, old age, death, passes away. And yet we ourselves feel as if we're the same. We're unchanging. We're a subject. The body is an object. And therefore it is foolish for us to take it to be ourself. It's as foolish as Shankaracharya says of a farmer. He's out in his field and he's looking at his cows in the field. He sees one cow with his big horns and tail, 4 feet, and he's looking at that cow and he thinks, what a beautiful cow. He says, I am a cow. You wouldn't think that how foolish is the farmer, just because he's looking at it, to think that he's identical with it. So this is the teaching of Vedanta. That is, we're in the body, but we are not the body. That's the first level of analysis. Just knowing that will give us some perspective on our way of living. But if we go deeper, we can see that sometimes it's not just our body that we take to be that is, we're analyzing our apparent self. We're analyzing our own answer to the question, who am I? How do I behave? What do I presume to be the fact? And secondarily, we think of ourselves. We have within the physical body, there is a more subtle body made of energy. It's called the prana maya kosha. The prana is just energy, only it's subtle energy. And that's the thing you have to understand. Kind of in Vedanta, everything is layered. There's gross, there's subtle, and there's causal. So when we say it's energy, it's subtle energy. It's what is it that makes our heart beat? What is it that causes the blood to circulate through the body? These are the different manifestations of the prana, the subtle, vital force within us. What is it that causes us the metabolism to go on and everything to be synchronized into a unified field? What is it overall that causes us and enables us to live and to breathe? Well, it's the vital breath. It's a life breath. It's our very life. That's our prana. It's our energy self. This prana within us, good word, by the way, for us to incorporate into our English vocabulary. Rather than call it energy, we want to call it subtle energy. It's a lot like electricity. Electricity, you plug in your computer lights up, everything comes online, everything is fine. Until there's a power outage, or you unplug the device, then everything goes dark. Similarly, as in the body. The prana is working through us. It enlivens us, just like the electricity enlivens the appliance. And just as an electricity, it has to flow through wires. It has to flow through channels and through a programming board. Similarly, as with the prana, it flows through, not through wires or arteries or veins, but through subtle channels. They're called nadis, hundreds and thousands in the body. These are the subtle channels of the subtle energy within us. Ordinarily, we don't pay much attention to our energy body. That is to say, as long as we're healthy and happy and enjoying life, going about our business, we don't have any occasion to think about what is empowering us to live. But if one of those meridians, one of those channels, one of those nadis becomes inflamed or becomes blocked or becomes obstructed or somehow twisted in some way so that there's no free flow of the subtle energy, then immediately we begin to feel a little malaise. We're feeling out of sorts. And if it becomes more serious, then we begin to feel tension and pressure and stress and strain. And we begin to feel aches and pains in our body. All is due to the flow of that energy within us. And it's at that time that our minds and our consciousness are drawn to that subtler level. And we do say, I am tense, I am anxious, I am feeling tight and overwhelmed. All those are feelings, those are sentences indicating that we're identifying with that, with the life of the prana within us, which is a second layer of ourselves. We take it to be ourself. That is to say, we're speaking. As we speak, we're just speaking our mind. We're speaking what we say to think is true. That is, I am anxious. That is, I am tense. That's the assumption. That's the indication that we've identified with our subtle energy body. And yet, the teaching of Vedanta is that you're not the body. It's not the subtle body. In ancient times, the Sankhya philosophers, the Sankhya philosophy, very important in Vedanta. Swami Vedarupananda gave 3 lectures on that subject, several classes, incorporated into the Vedanta philosophy as a good stepping stone in understanding. Fundamental analysis of the Sankhya philosophy is that analyze this whole world into 2 things. There's consciousness, and there's nature. That is yourself, there is yourself, and then there is the natural world, the world of our experience. The whole world of our experience can be reduced to 2 things, matter and energy. In Sanskrit it's called prana and akasha. Remember, there's levels of everything. There's gross energy, with which we're very familiar. But then there's subtle energy, and there's subtle matter, and there's causal energy, and there's causal matter, with which we're not so familiar. But with the analysis of the Sankhya philosophers, we see clearly there's a distinction between, on the one hand, your conscious self, that is consciousness, and nature. You are not nature. You're not the product. You're not the elements of nature. You are the observer, the witness of your own body and of the natural world. So that's the analysis there. You're the second level here of our analysis. So we can see like this, we're doing introspection. We're just kind of thinking about who am I, what is my nature, and how do I think about myself? How to do what in my ordinary walking around everyday mentality. Let's look here at the third layer of our being, the little deeper layer, which is our own mind. Now in Sankhya philosophy and yoga psychology, they give us a very helpful analogy to think about the mind. We think about psychology of the mind. What is the mind? Well, they give us an analogy, and that is that the mind is like a lake. And if you visualize a lake, which is, maybe the wind is blowing, and there are the waves, there are currents of movements of currents within the lake, and so there are ripples and there are waves on the surface. This is a mind in an ordinary state. But when the wind dies down, that is desires and intentions, and our subtle desires begin to subside, then the surface becomes more calm, and the water becomes more clear, and we can see through the water down to the bottom. That is the nature of the mind when it's calm and controlled, which is the focus and the purpose here of yoga psychology. And this is the mind. Good way for us to visualize the mind. That is the third level of our being. But now let's look a little closer, because the mind here, by the mind, in Vedanta we mean really referring to two things. The third and the fourth level of our being. That is, we have a lower mind and we have a higher mind. So let's look first here at the lower mind. In Sanskrit it's called the manas, but that's perceptual mind. The perceptual mind means is that just as we perceive the world through the five senses, and just as each one of those senses has, as it were, an attendant, a gatekeeper, that controls the ingress and the egress of that particular sense. And all of those attendants, 5 in number, we can say, are controlled by the attention. The manas is called, best translation of the manas is the attention. The attention is that which unifies all of our percepts, which gives us a unity of apperception, and which enables us to know things. Without the mind, we can't see, we can't hear, we can't know anything. You've experienced yourself. Maybe if you're sitting one day and your mind is absorbed in reading a book, and a whole parade can go by outside with a marching band and everything. Later on, someone will ask, well, did you enjoy that parade? You say, well, what? I didn't know there was a parade. Why? I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. My mind was elsewhere, we say. That means our mind, we were not attending to the senses. And so they became inert. And so the real power of perception, the real perceptual mind, that's the real perceiver, is the mind. The mind. We're calling the lower mind. This is the mind that takes the information from the senses that we're given from the world and experience, takes it in, refers it to our self-concept. That means our self-image. That's the sum total of all of our experiences, the image that we have of ourself, and refers it also to our memory and to all the sum total of our habits and our tendencies, called our samskaras and our vasanas. And then it reacts. This lower mind is the reactive mind. It reacts without thinking. It reacts without consideration or thought. It's to activate, as we living our lives, it will activate then the organs of action, that is our hands. Once we perceive something with our eyes and ears, then immediately we react by turning our head, by moving our hands, or turning to walk somewhere. All this is the reactive mind, that is lower mind. The subject of the lower mind is called the ego. The ego just means that ourself, our attention, our awareness, identified with our physical flesh and blood body, identified with our vital energies, identified with our senses, and identified with the perceptual mind, which monitors the senses. This is who we consider to be ourself. It's the referent for the use, our ordinary use of the word I. This is our ordinary, everyday, walking around sense of self. This ordinary self, that is this lower mind, is by nature emotional. It's feeling-based. It's not, it makes no reference to reason or to reflective awareness. It's non-reflective awareness. It's what sometimes psychologists call the inner child. The inner child, we know, well, we love children. But we know too that sometimes children are a little difficult to control. That is, as spiritual aspirants, when we're thinking of our own mind as an inner child, we're thinking of it in terms of our controlling our own mind and our dealing with the mind. We know that it's driven by emotion. It is driven by that it's impulsive, just like a child. That it acts without thinking. And not only that, but oftentimes it is unruly. That is, as spiritual aspirants, we're trying to control our own inner life, but we find it's out of control. Our minds are unruly. They're disobedient to our higher will. Well, that's what a child does. A child is like what if you tell a boy, why don't you take out his father tells the son, take out the garbage, help your mother, take out the garbage. And the son says, no, I'm playing video games now, I can't do that now. So what would you call such a boy? You call him, the word is disobedient. That's our minds. As spiritual, we're into yoga psychology. We're into controlling our own self, that is the higher and the lower. We often find that our minds are disobedient. They're out of our control. We're reactive. We think with that Swami Vedarupananda, his motto there, one of his mottos is, no reaction. That's the motto of the Brahmagyani. No reaction. But what can you do? The lower mind is always reactive. It's impulsive. It is driven by the pleasure principle. That's its only referent. And this is ourselves. We're just analyzing our own mind. This is our mind on automatic pilot, we could say. Just as a pilot goes down to the airport, and he's very conscientious and he's very conscious. He checks in, he goes up the plane, he gets in the plane, takes off down the runway, flies up high in the air. And now he's cruising at 10,000 feet. And now it's time, everything's under control. So what does he do? Well, maybe he just takes a coffee break. Puts it all on automatic pilot. Let the computers run it for a little while. And the computers are all programmed. So yeah, they'll run it fine for as long as there's no difficulties. They'll run it for a while. Similarly as with our mind, our lower mind. That's our mind on automatic pilot. We go through our whole life like this. Living habitually. Unreflective of what we're doing. Well, we know what we're doing. We don't have to think about it that much. We've planned out your day. You just go through your day and you do it. You don't have to reflect on it at all. And if you do have time, maybe you just stop and you just daydream a little bit. Or you just allow the mind to wander. That's called the default network. If you're not doing anything else in your mind, usually where you're at is the default network. That means your mind is just wandering. What does that mean? That means you're following the impulse of the vasanas, of just your desires, your attentions, you're habituated, you're conditioning. You're following your conditioning. And so there it is. That's the lower mind. Now let's go to the higher mind. We look here, thank God that we have. How do we get out of this situation? Well, we have a higher mind. We have a higher. That's part of the natural growth process here. Now we're just talking about natural maturing of the person. As the person grows, if he's in the healthy self-maturation process and individuation, becomes aware at some point, I have a reflective mind. I have a higher mind. I have a mind that's capable of observing the lower and controlling the lower and disciplining the lower and guiding the lower. This is the higher mind. In the Katha Upanishad, 3rd chapter, gives us a famous analogy. The analogy is that of the chariot. Our body is like a chariot. Our senses are like the horses. The sense objects are like our destinations. The roads that the horses travel. Our mind is like the reins. And our intellect, that is our higher mind, is like the driver of the chariot, the charioteer. Now, to that analogy of the Katha Upanishad, we remember in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, uses that same analogy, but it gives us one more reference point, and that is in that chariot there stands another person, and that is Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna means that's kind of our soul, our self, our higher self, our true self, our spirit. And the spirit advising the charioteer, that is our intellect, the intellect. So let's look here, that's why we call it higher. Maybe you don't like the idea of higher and lower. This is the idea of higher. Higher means this is not a power hierarchy. This is what would be called more of a growth hierarchy. It's a healthy hierarchy of the higher controlling the lower, monitoring, guiding the lower, leading the lower to a higher end. So let's look here at the higher mind. which is called reason. The word that we give to the higher mind is reason. This is the reason within us. The word reason is a favorite of the Greek philosophers. By reason here in Vedanta means that there is a universal intelligence. That universal intelligence, cosmic intelligence, that cosmic universal intelligence is reflected in the human mind as reason. That's what makes us human. It's only humankind that has that faculty, that higher faculty, which is called the buddhi, which is called the intellect. Animals have flesh and blood bodies and vital force bodies and feelings and emotions, but they don't have the higher intelligence, the reasoning powers that makes us, that gives us, that marks the nature of humankind. Reason is that power within us that enables us to take all of the information of the senses and to unify them, to form concepts and ideas, to know what we see, to make sense of what we see and hear and touch and feel, and to form ideas. Reason is the power that gives us it's the power of discrimination, the power of judgment, making judgments. You have the power to make judgments. Is it true? Is it false? Is it right or wrong? In addition to that's your reasoning within you. That's the intelligence within you is in operating. That also is your power here of thinking. When we say thinking here, we mean logical thinking. Logic here is the means or the method of reason. It enables us to arrive at knowledge and so that's our reasoning faculty. So whenever we say, I know, I've decided, I think, I am thinking, usually when we're thinking, we're not really thinking, we're just operating on conditioned programming. But when we've taken charge of our thinking, and we're thinking rationally, then we're really thinking. And that's when we're abiding in our higher self, and we're identified with ourself. We say, yes, I'm thinking. And the Swami Vivekananda called this the determinative faculty within us. It's called, we could call it the logos within us. We have a power within us. It's called intelligence. That power that manifests as reason. That power is your logos within us, enables us to know the logos in the world. We live in a cosmos. We can know about the cosmos. We can understand it. We can, how do we know it and understand it? Through use of our reason. And that's what makes us a mature person. This is the point at which in yoga philosophy, in Indian philosophy, we're talking here about yoga and the practice of the different kinds of spiritual practice. All the yogas assume that this is where we start. All the yogas in ancient times, they had a doctrine called the Sadhikaravada, which means that there's certain qualifications for practicing any yoga. And the unspoken qualification here is that you are a mature enough person, that you are a person who we would call today, we would say that you have come to the age of reason. That is, you are a mature person. That means is that you're able to control your emotions. You have perspective. You're more or less as relative to a child. You're grown up. You're able to manage yourself. You're individualized. You are independent. You are integrated relatively. That's why you were called an adult. You're autonomous. You have a moral hierarchy. You know the difference between right and wrong. This is what makes you a mature person. This is where yoga psychology starts. This is where yoga begins. It assumes that. If you don't have all that, then you don't need waking up. You need growing up. Now, this yoga, this reason, we're looking here at reason, higher mind. This higher mind has even a deeper level. That is to say, this is the higher mind is a natural process of maturation in a person. It comes with age and experience. However, the mind is capable of a higher evolution. That is the buddhi, the intelligence within us. Reason can evolve. An evolved, trained reason is called intuition. We have within us a potential for intuitive knowing. The intuition is just reason, and it's what Swami Vedarupananda calls evolved reason. It's the ability, intuition is the power for us to know things independently of the senses and of the logical method of the mind. It's the intuition that is the gateway to the higher, to the superconscious, which is of interest to us because we're interested in yoga sadhana, yoga practice. We're interested in accessing the superconscious mind. In order to do that, we need to begin to train ourselves, evolve our own higher minds into this higher intelligence. We could call it intelligence, we could call it spiritual intelligence. It's the spirit, intuition is the spiritual intelligence within us. As contrasted with reason, it's a higher way of making decisions and of orienting our lives. We could call it, now the subject of this level, we could call it the wisdom self. And this higher mind has a, just like our mind, just like the world, just like the earth, has a topography, like the ocean. You go down to the bottom of the ocean, just like the same on the earth. There's mountains and there's valleys and there's rivers and there's all kinds of this stuff. Come up on the surface of the world, we said the same terrain and topology. Similarly, it is in the superconscious, the subconscious. There's the conscious and there's the superconscious. And the superconscious also has a topology. It has a terrain. And there are levels of the superconscious. This is where we begin to discuss subjects like the superconscious or extrasensory perception, or different levels of mysticism, deity mysticism, and yogic mystic experiences. All of this occurs in the domain of the superconscious. But let's just leave that aside for a moment. Go back to the higher mind. Because before we can access the superconscious, before we can access our intuition, we need to transcend the higher mind. That is to transcend what we've called here reason. We have to understand, Vedanta teaches us, that reason has its limits. There are limits to reason. For example, we know the logic or inductive logic, it can't give you absolute proof. Deductive logic will just kind of tell you what's already pre-established in the premises. Logic and reasoning has no moral compass. Tells us how to do something, how we should. If you want this, you do this. But it can't tell us what do you want. It has no willpower. It's the handmaiden of all of these other powers. Reason also is dependent on language. We can't think without words. We can't reason without words. And words are by nature wedded to this relative material world, this dual world of dualism. The nature of a word is that it describes what a thing is and what a thing is not. And therefore, whenever we use language, it defines, but it's necessarily exclusive. It cannot give us that holistic, intuitive understanding that we seek. These are the limits of reason. These are the limits of the higher mind. And therefore, Vedanta teaches that we have to loosen our grasp on the knowledge mind. And we have to give a space between the wisdom self and the spiritual intelligence and the rational intelligence. We have to make a space. We have to make detachment. We have to go deeper within ourselves in search of our true nature. We're still on this progression of layers. We come to the fifth layer. There is another layer of ourselves. It is called the blissful self. We know that when we fall at night, at the end of the day, you lay down, you close your eyes, and the senses shut down, and our metabolism slows, we fall asleep, the whole external world disappears, we enter into the subtle world, the intellect is occluded, our ordinary waking ego is shut down. Now it's the dream person comes alive, motivated by feelings and by emotions and by the imagination rules. That's our dream. But then even then, the mind becomes tired and falls into a deeper state that's called deep sleep state. State of deep sleep. In that state, there we are. We sleep. We know nothing. Maybe it's happy. That's a state of kind of blissful happiness, but it's happiness without any sense objects. There's nothing there to make us happy. There's no experiences there that make us happy. And yet, when we wake up in the morning the next day, what do we say? We say, I slept happily, and I knew nothing. This is an experience that we have of our deep level of ourself. We're talking now about ourself, a phenomenological self. We call it the blissful self. We say, I am. I was there. I slept happily. But the teaching of Vedanta is, of course, that what do we mean there by happiness? The happiness that we have, and the lesson we learn from that deep sleep is that we don't need sense objects. That's not the source of our happiness. That those are just occasions when the happiness bubbles up from within us. But even then, even in deep sleep, we are not know our true nature. We're not truly happy. Shankaracharya gives the analogy of a clay pot of cold water brought into the little village house. There it sits. If you go over and put your hand on the pot on a hot summer day, it's very cooling. It's cool and it's cold, but you're touching the pot, you're not touching the water. And in fact, in Vedanta we say, I slept happily and I knew nothing. That means I did not know myself. I did not know anything. I know, what did I know? I knew that there was no duality. There's no external world. There's no body, there's no mind, there's no ego, there's no senses. I knew all that, but I didn't know my true nature. And that's why we come at the end of the discrimination. This is discrimination. So we've taken this flesh and blood body, which is the content of the body self. And then we've gone deeper within us, and we have taken the vital energies, are the content of the vital energy self. And we look there at the mind and the feelings and impulses and emotions. We have the content of our lower mind. And then we have our decisions and our reasoning and our thinking and rationality is the content of our higher mind, the Vijnana Maya Kosha, the wisdom self, our spiritual, that is our spiritual intelligence. We could call it our wisdom self. But deeper than that, having discriminated all those 5 layers, what is left? What is left is your consciousness, just your awareness, absolved of all the layer after layer, disencumbered of all the weight and the baggage. And there it is, that is your nature, the witness, the pure awareness. It remains as an analytical truth. We say, yes, that makes sense. It's like an analytical statement. That is my nature. It's a necessary truth. It's an a priori experience. And that's our true nature. This is the analysis of the Vedanta philosophy. And now, all we have to do is realize it. That's all that remains. Yeah? We have to think about it. We have to reason about it. And we have to meditate on it, understand it, and begin to incorporate it into our deeper understanding and to embody it. That's our project. By doing so, it will enable us, this analysis is a means and a method that it will enable us to realize our true nature. Swami.